December 12, 2023. Kyiv wakes up to silence. No calls, no messages, no internet. Across the city, phones flicker, no signal. In office towers and underground shelters, confusion turns to fear. Emergency lines are dead. Bank terminals refuse to connect. Even the hum of data, those invisible pulses that hold a nation together, has vanished. A mother in Dnipro can't reach her son on the front lines. A doctor in Chernihiv loses contact with a hospital mid-surgery. Screens that once carried life now reflect only static blue light. Somewhere in the darkness, inside an unmarked building, a team of engineers stare at their monitors. Kyivstar's entire network, Ukraine's largest telecom, is collapsing. Routers blink red like dying embers. Code scrolls endlessly. Corrupted, overwritten, gone. One man whispers, "This isn't a malfunction, it's an attack." But by then, it's already too late. Behind the silence lies a name the world has feared for years. Sandworm. Who are they? How do you fight an enemy that lives in code, and why did they choose this day to erase the voice of a nation? Before the blackout, before the silence, before Ukraine's networks bled into static, there was a shadow moving through cables and servers across the world. Sandworm wasn't born in a lab or university. It was forged in a war room buried deep under Moscow. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's Unit 744551 of the GRU's most feared cyber divisions, commanded by Russia's military intelligence. Their targets: infrastructure, power, communication, the invisible skeleton of modern life. Their first major strike came in 2015. Ukraine's power grid went dark for 6 hours. It wasn't just electricity, they switched off an entire country's heartbeat. Engineers rebooted systems manually, using flashlights. Then came 2016, another blackout. 2017, NotPetya. A piece of malware disguised as accounting software spiraled out of control, wiping systems in 65 countries, causing $10 billion in damages. The world called it the most destructive cyber attack in history, but Sandworm didn't stop. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the group evolved from a shadow hacker unit to a full-blown weapon of war. Servers became battlefields. Code became artillery. For every missile in the sky, there was malware crawling through wires below. Kyivstar, Ukraine's telecom lifeline, was more than just a company. It was how soldiers called home, how aid workers coordinated evacuations, how the digital front line stayed connected to the human one. And so, in December 2023, when millions of Ukrainians woke to silence, it wasn't coincidence. It was the culmination of nearly a decade of invisible warfare. Behind the attack was something more deliberate, more poetic in its cruelty, not just to break infrastructure, but to break connection itself. At 5 a.m., Kyivstar's network monitoring center detected anomalies: massive traffic surges from unknown internal IPs. Within minutes, authentication servers began to fail. Then, the routers. Then the backups. Technicians scrambled to reroute through reserve nodes in Lviv, Kharkiv, and Odessa, but the infection spread faster than they could move. Entire clusters went offline, blinking from green to gray to red. By sunrise, more than 24 million mobile devices had lost connection. Kyiv's skyline, usually alive with digital noise, was eerily still. No taxis receiving GPS signals, no elevators connected to smart grids. Even traffic lights along Kreshchatik began glitching, flickering between green and red like dying neurons. At headquarters, engineers realized what was happening: a coordinated, multi-vector attack targeting both virtual and physical layers. The code wasn't just disabling systems, it was reformatting them. Servers that had taken years to configure were being erased in seconds. Inside Ukraine's State Service of Special Communications, alarms blared. Analysts traced the intrusion. A familiar fingerprint, same obfuscation pattern, same command and control servers, same linguistic metadata. Sandworm, the same group that had once plunged power plants into darkness, was now cutting the country's voice. In a secure room, a senior Ukrainian cybersecurity officer whispered, "They're not stealing, they're burning." For hours, data centers were locked down as forensic teams isolated infected nodes. Kyivstar CEO Oleksandr Komarov would later describe it as total digital annihilation. Systems had to be rebuilt from scratch, a process that took weeks. By then, the message from Sandworm was clear: Ukraine could defend its borders, but no wall could defend its signal. The attack caused an estimated $90 100 million in damages, yet the true cost wasn't money, it was the sound of millions of voices suddenly cut off in the middle of a war. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, can't arrest, can't even locate? The answer would come days later, when Ukrainian cyber teams decided to fight back, not with missiles, but with code. In the days following the blackout, Ukraine's Cyber Command transformed from a quiet defense unit into a digital war room. The mood was somber, focused. Screens glowed in the half-dark like campfires in a bunker. Each monitor displayed a new frontline server. Maps, packet traces, decoded payloads. They called it Operation Phoenix. The mission: trace the worm, identify its operators, and strike back without crossing into escalation. Engineers from Kyivstar, Ukraine's SSSCIP, and NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center in Tallinn all worked in silent coordination. The malware that crippled Kyivstar wasn't random, it was hand-tailored. Analysts discovered lines of code embedded with Cyrillic comments, identical encryption modules from earlier Sandworm campaigns. The attackers had breached months earlier, lying dormant, quietly collecting admin credentials before detonating the payload. It wasn't sabotage, it was orchestration. Using captured network logs, Ukraine's team followed the digital breadcrumbs through compromised routers in Poland, proxy servers in Iran, and finally, to a cluster in Moscow disguised as a data analytics firm. That was Sandworm's style, invisible until it wasn't. By December 18th, they launched their countermeasure, an adaptive network isolation routine that contained and quarantined infected nodes without destroying what remained. Bit by bit, Kyivstar's digital lungs began to breathe again. SMS lines returned, internet flickered back to life. For millions, the first sign of recovery wasn't a headline. It was a single text message finally delivered. "You okay?" Still, for every node restored, Ukraine's analysts saw something haunting: traces of scripts not yet activated, fragments of unfinished attacks, test payloads labeled Hydra, V2, and Blackout, Grid. Sandworm hadn't finished, they had only tested. In Washington, Brussels, and London, officials went silent during briefings. Everyone knew, if this code were unleashed on Europe's telecom grids, the damage could be incalculable. A senior NATO analyst put it bluntly: if Sandworm can take down an entire country's network mid-war, imagine what they can do in peacetime. The attack forced Ukraine's allies to see cyber warfare not as theory, but as artillery made of data. The front line had no trenches now, only servers. And behind every server, a human heartbeat trying to keep the world connected. To understand Sandworm is to understand the psychology of power without borders. They are not anonymous rebels or thrill-seeking hackers, they are soldiers in a secret digital battalion. Each operator works in silence, behind state-owned terminals deep within the GRU's tower on Khoroshevskoye Highway, Moscow. They clock in, write code, and go home ordinary routines concealing extraordinary damage. Their operations follow a philosophy of control through chaos. Destroy the enemy's communication, and you destroy coordination. Destroy coordination, and fear fills the silence. Inside Russian doctrine, cyber warfare is not support, it's the spearhead, a digital missile fired before the real ones. Western analysts have spent years trying to map Sandworm's hierarchy, but the structure constantly mutates. Unit 74455 is the body. Its limbs are proxy networks, front companies, and contractors scattered across Eastern Europe. Its fingerprints appear in fake emails, spear phishing campaigns, and corrupted firmware updates. And every time it's exposed, it changes skin, new IPs, new names, new masks. Yet beneath that fluid architecture lies a core belief: the future of dominance is electrical, not territorial. Every time Ukraine builds something, an app, a tower, a satellite uplink, Sandworm learns how to destroy it. In leaked GRU documents later analyzed by cybersecurity researchers, the group refers to Ukraine not by name, but by the code name, Field. Their mission statement: disrupt Field's continuity in all digital layers. Disrupt. For them, war is not only about tanks and drones, it's about erasing the very concept of connection. But in that same December week, while Sandworm celebrated what they believed was another victory, something unexpected happened. Ukraine's network engineers, many of them unpaid volunteers, began rebuilding the grid by hand. They used laptops salvaged from destroyed offices, connected cables across backup generators, and coded new firewalls from scratch. Every line of code was an act of defiance. Kyivstar's data center, once glowing red from alerts, slowly returned to blue. Bit by bit, Ukraine resurrected itself from digital ashes. And for the first time in years, Sandworm's operators faced something they didn't anticipate: a country that refused to stay offline. When the signals came back, they didn't arrive all at once. They trickled in like dawn after a long winter night. First came scattered pings from rural towers, then the city centers, then, finally, the military lines that tied Ukraine's defense grid together. After 5 days of silence, Kyiv heard itself again. But the country was changed. People began speaking about the blackout as if it were a memory of war, a moment when even air felt heavy, when silence carried the weight of fear. Supermarkets reopened, hospitals reconnected, but every screen that flickered to life carried the same question. Could it happen again? For Kyivstar's engineers, the answer was not if, but when. They began building what they called resilience layer, servers split across multiple nations, encrypted data mirrored in real time, recovery systems stored in NATO-secured networks. No single point of failure, no single day of silence ever again. Meanwhile, in The Hague, cyber investigators at the International Criminal Court began piecing together digital evidence for what could become the first cyber war crimes case in history. The fragments of code that once flickered on Ukrainian screens were now part of global legal archives, proof that keystrokes could become weapons. In Moscow, Sandworm remained silent. No statement, no denial, only the absence of noise, the quiet confidence of ghosts. But intelligence intercepts suggested internal tension. Some operatives had gone dark, others reassigned. Western agencies called it a pause. Ukrainian analysts called it the inhale before the next strike. Even so, the people adapted. When systems fail, humans improvise. In small towns, volunteers set up analog radios. In Kyiv, coders created offline mesh networks, devices that connect phone to phone, bypassing central servers altogether. It was digital guerrilla warfare, an army of civilians refusing to vanish from the grid. And for the first time, Sandworm's silence worked against them. Because the world was listening, the hack that was meant to cripple a nation had instead unified it and exposed the fragility of every digital empire pretending to be untouchable. That December day no longer belonged to Sandworm. It belonged to the millions who lost connection and rebuilt it with their own hands. Months later, Kyivstar's servers hum with a new rhythm. Stronger, wiser, haunted. The engineers still remember the moment the lights went red, the silence that followed, and the nights spent coding under generator light. Their rebuild wasn't just technical, it was spiritual. Each restored node became a small act of resistance. Each reconnected signal, a quiet victory over erasure. Ukraine's cyber command began teaching its lessons to the world. Officials from Europe, Asia, even Latin America arrived in Kyiv to study the anatomy of the December blackout. For the first time, global leaders spoke of digital deterrence with the same weight as nuclear doctrine. Firewalls became fortresses, passwords became shields. The invisible war had gone public. Yet behind the policies and protocols, the truth lingered. No system is invincible. Cyber warfare is not just about code, it's about people. Humans make errors, humans write defenses, and humans, somewhere, always decide who to silence. Investigators traced the attack's command nodes back to GRU-linked infrastructure, old Soviet buildings repurposed as data bunkers. A handful of operatives were indicted by name in Western courts. They will likely never stand trial. But for the first time, the mask cracked. Sandworm was no longer a myth whispered in cybersecurity circles. It was a face on an international wanted list. In Kyiv, they framed the first recovered server drive on the wall of the operations center. On it, burned in by the attack, was a single corrupted file name, Phoenix Exe. Nobody knew whether Sandworm left it as a taunt or whether a Ukrainian engineer created it as an act of hope, but that name became symbolic. It told the story of a nation that refused digital death. Today, Ukraine's network stands as one of the most hardened on Earth. Every ping, every byte, carries the memory of that December morning when a country vanished from the grid and came back stronger. The war in Ukraine continues, both on the ground and in the wires. Somewhere, in a Moscow basement, new code is being written. And somewhere in Kyiv, someone is already watching for it, eyes fixed on a flickering screen, listening for the first heartbeat of another storm. Because in this new age, silence is not peace. It's the sound of war, waiting to begin again.